Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. I am so excited to get this going. Rest assured, I will get the technical kinks working, and by the end of this should be an excellent information-driven session. And the goal here is really to cover some of the bases, right? Because obviously, this is that time of the year. I like to call it hunting season. I'm sure you guys, just like me, it's the end of a competitive season. Offers are being received or considered. Those good old questions come. I mean, should I stay at the same club? Should I move on? What is the deal with ECNL again and GA? Is it the time? What is the best platform? All those questions seem to constantly come up, at least in my situation. So the thing with this is that, well, a while back I decided, you know what? Let me just kind of go in and once and for all clarify this situation and fully understand this youth development landscape and make sure that I get it once and for all. Well, that was a headache-inducing activity. It turns out this is really a convoluted madness, as I said on this slide. But then I decided to dive in, and today's presentation is to share some of the findings, again, with the hope that at the end of this, if not all questions have been answered, at least you would have gained more clarity into the path forward. Our kids are really early in the process, which is a good thing. There's, still some time, but at least the more clarity we get at this stage, I think will reduce the friction and the tensions and the stress and so on going forward. So really, the inception of this, these are the 4 questions I have been constantly pondering about youth soccer, right? It's like, how do we make soccer more accessible? How do we help develop soccer players? How do we identify the best path? And then how do we even create a local task force? These are my internal research, I would say my research focus. However, today's presentation will focus on point number 3, which is how do we identify the best path for our players and how do we guide them through that process? And then in terms of these other questions, after this presentation, if you're interested to find out more or you want to share more feedback and things of that nature, I'll be more than happy to get together with you or even have another presentation so we can go on. All right. So the outline of our presentation today will be divided in 3 parts. Okay, the first part will be fairly theoretical. So let me just kind of warn you about that. There's a bunch of acronyms. I quickly found out that this youth soccer world is almost like if you're in the military or the healthcare industry or maybe the energy business, then you might feel comfortable. If not, this can be a drag. A lot of acronyms, but we will kind of have to just kind of go through it quickly. A lot of this stuff you might already be familiar. If you are, fine, but I'm sure some people might just need to clarify it better. The second part will now go into the meat of this presentation, right? The different pathways and opportunities that we'll explore. And then the last part is when I think the real fun will also begin for some of us. Bring out your sunglasses and let the fun begin. That's when we'll talk about the good old GA versus ECNL comparisons and opportunities. On this call, we have folks from GA, we have folks from ECNL, we even have folks from ECRL. So it will be an interesting conversation. The goal, though, at the end of the day, is really not to create any tension. It's about providing information so that we can make the best informed decision. That will always be the focus of this, and we can choose the pathway that suits us best. All right. So just a quick note here, what is a pathway? Now, if you're in the youth soccer world, this is kind of like a buzzword. You hear all the time, pathway. So in a sense, it's really just about going up the pyramid, right? With every stop of the pyramid representing a level. And so you will see I have 3 different pathways here. There's the elite, recreational, and unconventional. Most of us will be on that left one, right? On the elite pathway, so to speak. But it is possible for some of us to be thinking about a recreational side. So I will just touch upon that very quickly. And then there's the unconventional, which if you look at the top of the pyramid of the unconventional, guess what? It still gets you to the professional if that's your aspiration, or college or high school if that's also your aspiration. And we will look at some very specific cases of folks who have followed that unconventional path and have ended in the highest soccer level. But most of us, again, at this stage will be on step one of the elite pathway, the GA, which includes DPL, we have the ECNL, ECRL, and so on. And ahead of us, there's ODP. Some of us already participate. There's potentially the U.S. national team, the youth national teams. There's college. There's pros for those who are aspiring to it. And so I will spend a bit more time on that pyramid or the pathway on the left. Quickly, GA. I won't spend too much time on this, but essentially it's a girl-only platform, and this was created in 2020. Those who were already in competitive soccer at the time might recall that there was something called the DA, Development Academy, that suddenly closed in the middle of the season. And so what ended up happening? Well, you had some leaders of another league called the DPL that said, you know what, let's create a league. And so that's how the GA came about. So it's, as I mentioned, it came as a result of the DA failing, the Development Academy. The DA, again, I'm going to go quickly through some of this concept so that we would just kind of get a sense and an idea. The DA was essentially a league that was created in 2007, and it was a boys-only league initially. Then a girls' component was added in 2017, but unfortunately 3 years later, in 2020, it just folded because of financial issues with COVID-19 and so on. And when it folded, well, clubs had to scramble and figure out, what do we do next? So some of the clubs were accepted into the ECNL as a result of that in 2020, and the remaining clubs ended up joining the GA, which was created by DPL leaders. I mentioned DPL. What exactly is that DPL, which is the Development Player League? The DPL, yeah, so it's the parent of the GA. It is considered a lower league than the GA. Now, here in Houston, we do not have DPL clubs, but if you look at the map on the right, you will see that there are clubs in Dallas and so on. There's a frontier league also in the DPL, but does not include Houston teams, but Dallas, Oklahoma, and so on. And so the DPL was initially created in 20. I believe it was. I don't have the year here, but it was an answer to some of the restraints that DA was putting on. For example, the DA, the Development Academy, say that if you want to be part of this competitive league, guess what? Girls cannot play college, cannot play high school soccer. Well, that caused a lot of friction because, as you know, high school is a critical part of of young people's development. You have your friends, you have your community, you have your social connections, and so the DPL came about just to kind of provide a more balanced approach to soccer. Well, right now, there's a strategic alliance that was created so that the best DPL teams are able to attend GA events, okay? And so the GA is using that as a way to kind of identify potential future GA teams. So, and that's sort of kind of like a promotion type of system that is being put in place, just in the same way the ECNL and the ECRL and so on is being done on the other side, which we will touch upon later. Okay, so one last thing about the GA. This is, in my opinion, a good thing. I don't know if a lot of people know about this, because as I was even asking questions, it seems like a lot of people do not. Well, the GA has this pretty interesting thing, which is an advisory panel, right? So it's essentially to carry the players' voices to the board, to participate in strategic direction of the league as a whole. This is an excellent leadership opportunity because it turns out that actually every club has representatives, which I found out later. Initially, I did not even know about this, but every club in the GA has 6 representatives on the girl advisory panel. So of those 6 representatives, there are 2 that are voted as the overall club representative. All right, so like Rise has 2 club representatives. And so those reps will end up reporting to conference reps, there is 2 reps per conference. So for the whole Frontier Conference, which is the one in which we are, we have 2 conference representatives. There's Chelsea Cross, who's Kevin Cross's daughter, and then there's Hania, who is with HTX. So those are the 2 conference representatives for the whole Frontier Conference. This is a voted position. There are processes into it. There's a process to get into it. I mean, we can discuss it further for those who are interested. But again, this is just a great leadership opportunity to supplement, your soccer training for those who have those aspirations. And then you have, ambassadors. You have the rector, who then gets the voices from those ambassadors and goes to the GA commissioner. All right. Again, very theoretical, but I think it's important to know everything about the environment in which we are so that we can make good decisions, or the best decision possible going forward. All right, a final point, the GA is now part of the U.S. Soccer Federation. U.S. Soccer Federation is essentially 116 organization that work to promote soccer across the United States, from the grassroots level to the professional leagues. You have STX, US Club Soccer, you have the MLS. So there's many organizations, 116, as I said. All right, let's move on to the ECNL. So, what exactly is the ECNL? Stands for Elite Club National League. So this was founded in 2009. I'm sorry, not 2009. Yes, 2009. Initially, it was a girl-only league, and then in 2017, boys were added. And so, as of 2019, so about 5 years ago, the ECRL, which stands for ECNL Regional League, was created. And so the ECRL really was for teams that still wanted competitive soccer, but did not want to travel as much, which is why that league was created. So the biggest difference is really that on the ECRL level, you compete at the regional level. The ECNL competes at the national level. And so Kristen Levers is the CEO and co-founder, and Doug Bracken is the vice president. An interesting thing about Christian is that he is also involved with the NWSL Kansas City, or at least he was. He was named in 2021 to be part of player development with the national NWSL team. The ECNL has some pretty interesting initiatives. There's this one, which I think is very exciting. It's the Heritage Project, which was launched April 9th, 2024. So essentially, this is an initiative that connects players to international federations. So if you have parents or grandparents who were born somewhere else or have, different citizenship, well, the ECNL has created this new avenue to connect those current ECNL players and alumni to those federations, so that if they can make the U.S. national team, they might have an opportunity to make a different country's national team, which I think is an interesting thing, just to provide more pathways to young players. And then if you're interested to know more, just keep up to date with the ECNL. There's a podcast called Breaking the Line, which was launched in September of 2020. There's I think about 93 episodes now. You can find it on YouTube, other platforms. If you're a soccer fanatic like I am, or one of those people just want to know all about the youth development landscape, this is an additional resource. I find it very interesting to just listen to those conversations. All right. ODP, I think most of us on this call, or many of us, are in ODP, and the others might know of it. If not, it just stands for Olympic Development Program, which initially was formed in 1977 as a pathway towards a national team. That was really the intent back then, is to identify the best players across the nation to eventually funnel them into the national team. That is no longer the case today. So today it's mostly just supplemental training. So you get selected on your state's tryout, as most of us did, and then if you make it, then you make the ODP team. It is not designed to replace your club. It is supplemental. So one might ask, what are the benefits today, right? If there's really no automatic pathway to the national team or anything else, why would I do ODP? Well, there's many benefits. A few of those are, just more development. And I think also the opportunity to train with some of the best players in your age group, right? And then just be exposed to quality coaches. That may vary based on feedback that I receive from other parents and so on. But in our case, my daughter being in the 2012, and obviously many of you too, I think we have a very good coach who is very qualified and understands soccer well. So that is a plus, in the development of a player, just getting different voices, different philosophies, different approaches is a plus. And in interesting trivia, over 90% of the women on the U.S. national team at the 2019 World Cup, at some point or another, were in an ODP team. So it could be for 1 year, 2 year. Typically, as you go up in the ECNL rank, you will see that players will not participate in ODP anymore. But it's interesting to see that at some point they participated. Okay. All right, let's move on to something which I think will be more exciting than all these acronyms we've been covering until now. It's the national teams. So just so that you know, there is currently 14 youth national teams, right? 7 men and 7 women. The table shows 8 rows, I know, but it's 7. The 8th is the number 1 in this table is the U14. That is actually something fairly new that started in 2019. And that is not really a competition-based team, right? Because that's more of a development program. So the players who get selected in the U14 do not participate in international competition. But it's kind of like ODP. You just essentially get training and you get developed, and to eventually be funneled into older age groups, which starts at the U15 all the way to U23. U23, which typically will go to the Olympics and so on. So you have men and women. All right. So how do we make it to the U.S. national team? If that's part of your pathway aspiration, it's essentially going through something that's called the Talent ID Centers. Okay, the IDC, that's how you get into the youth national team. And the IDCs are essentially free. It's a single-day event, and you get to participate and train under the direction of U.S. soccer managers. And so to facilitate the process, U.S. soccer has divided the U.S. in 4 different regions: north, south, east, west, as you can see on the map on the right. And they organize IDCs in different regions across the U.S. just to make it easy for kids to participate in those single-day selection events, so you don't have to travel really far, which I think is interesting. In 2022, there were 4,000 boys and girls that attended. 15 of those, boys aged 13, 15 that attended the IDCs. So you see that there's massive opportunity to participate. Being selected is a different situation, but getting the opportunity to go is available, and it is through those IDCs. So if you really wanted to make it, what's the process? Well, you can be selected by 2 different ways, right? Either you've been scouted by a U.S. soccer manager, which typically will not happen for U14 anyways. It's kind of, the kids are still young at that age. So the best entry mechanism, or the most common entry mechanism for that age group, is through recommendation. So your club and your coach can recommend you to U.S. soccer. So once you get recommended, then you participate. In terms of being eligible, any player, there's no restriction from any club. You don't have to be GA, you don't have to be ECNL, you could be ECRL, you could be HISA, whatever league, you can be recommended. All right, you obviously have to be a U.S. citizen and so on. And once you're recommended, you go. It's free. You don't pay anything. Unfortunately, parents are not allowed to attend. Now, I'll put a little note there. We can always get a drone, right? Nowadays, you just fly a little one with some of the fanatics nowadays who want to watch everything from ODP and so on. But the rule is we're not, as parents, we're not allowed to attend those sessions. So your kids will go, and then you get the results after the fact. Coaches can go, coaches and club directors, but they have to receive permission ahead of time to go and accompany their players. So for the cycle, the 2023 cycle, just a few numbers, there are a total of 2024 players that attended the IDCs in the different regions. So 224 players total. And out of those players, only about 16% ended up being selected into the final roster for the U14, like 36 players out of 224. So it is very competitive, obviously, to get in. Now, for those players selected, as I said, it's kind of like ODP. They went through multiple training sessions, and then they get divided into rosters of 18 and play against each other. So it's really following the same ODP format. So that's how you get into the U.S. national team, if that's something that is interesting for you and you think that your daughter might benefit from this. All right. Now, on the pathway, quitting soccer is something that is worth talking about. Many of us will say, no, my child loves soccer. My child will not quit, which I hope that is not the case. But the reality is there are a lot of kids who end up quitting soccer. And so on the pathway, that's like the next stop. But why is that? First, let's look at some numbers. It's interesting that by age 13, 70% of kids drop out of sport. So that's not a typo, 70. And these numbers are from the AAP, which is the American Academy of Pediatrics. 70% of kids drop sports by age 13. By age 14, and that's kids general, right? Boys and girls. By age 14, 45% of girls drop out of sports. And at that point, it's twice the rate of boys. By the time they get to age 17, more than 50% of all girls quit sports. Now, the reasons that we will discuss here do not necessarily apply to the 17-year-old, because they have different reasons. Typically, it's soccer is just not in their future. Sports is not in their future. They have to balance their social life, but also they want to focus more on school. So the 17-year-old is a little different, typically speaking. But when we talk about kids that are 13 and so on, typically the reasons that cause them to quit is injuries is a big one. You have ACLs, you have overuse and so on. So constant repetition, not recovering enough, ends up causing a lot of stress, and a lot of kids end up quitting because of that. You have a psychological impact. A lot of kids will just tell you it's not fun anymore, right? Either they're burned out or disappointments. Like right now, we're going through phases where maybe some players don't get offers in the levels that they wanted, or club disappointment, one or another. That is a big reason for quitting for kids. Now, in terms of the overuse, the burnout, the AAP recommends that we should give our kids at least 1 or 2 off days per week. To some of us, that may seem a lot, but that's a recommendation, which personally I tend to follow with my daughter. When we have games, it's difficult to get to the 2-day threshold, but when there are no games that weekend, it is 2, even 3 days of rest. Now, the AAP also recommends 2 to 3 months per year. Now, that's a lot, like 3 months away from soccer, but that's a recommendation. We have body image issues and social media. So kids will develop low confidence just based on what they see in social media, TV advertisement and so on. And there's many other reasons, like coaching. Maybe the coach is just not the right coach and the kid mentally just does not thrive. A lack of role model, lack of women coaches. So these are the facts, right? So it's important not to just brush it aside, but understand what is happening so that we can be better equipped to deal with this should these issues come up. So those are very high numbers. The hope is obviously that every single one of our kids will continue loving the game and playing. Next, a pathway. If high school is in your card, there's really not much to say. High school is, it's tryout based, right? You go to a school, you try out. Most kids will make it. But it's an important part of the mental well-being of kids. Remember the whole thing I mentioned about DA. When DA decided that kids could no longer play high school soccer, that created so much friction, so much anger. Some people just even left just to go in DPL and so on. So it's not the most competitive and the best quality soccer, obviously, but it is definitely great for the friendship, for the community, for our kids to thrive. So that's highly recommended. Of course, we have to factor in the overuse and things of that nature, but high school soccer is definitely an option for, I would say, almost all kids who want to participate. If their school has a team and you try out, at least teams that come from club soccer should be able to make it. College is a big one. Okay, so I will not dive too deeply into college. Obviously, with our kids, that's like 6-7 years down the line. But there's just a few things. I will really breeze through this, okay? If you need more clarification after the fact, we can always come to it. Soccer, we've all heard Title IX, or most of us have probably heard of Title IX. But if I ask you, what exactly is it? Many people might not know the specifics. Okay, so it's essentially just a law that was passed in 1972 as part of the Education Amendment. This is one of the main reasons why not only college soccer, but sports, generally speaking, has become more accessible to a lot of young girls, college, high school, and so on. It is because of this law. The law, as you can see the statute down there, I don't have to read the all of it, but essentially it's about not being excluded from participating or denied benefits or subjected to discrimination under any education program that receives federal financial assistance. Okay, so sports is not mentioned anywhere in this. So you might ask yourself, okay, well, how exactly is Title IX beneficial to sport, or is it a sport law? Well, it is not a sport law per se, but as I say, it's responsible for the increased participation of girls, right? Because almost every college and secondary school, which is high school and so on, receives some kind of federal funding. And so if they do, sport is considered an education program. Therefore, they need to abide by Title IX requirements. There's three main requirements here. One, you have to provide equal participation opportunities, an equal amount of scholarship, and other benefits. Equal does not mean the same number per sport, but when you look at the entire athletic programs of your school, you want the opportunities to be equally provided, which is why in some school you have American football, but you won't have a men's soccer team, but you'll have a women's soccer team, right? Because you need to balance out the opportunities. And so Title IX is the reason for that. And if you want to see the numbers, like before Title IX, if you look at the 1971-1972 season, you only had 30,000 women, female athletes, 30,000. Compare that to today, which we have 218,000, over 218,000. That's for the 2022-2023 season. So we went from about 15% of all athletes to about 44% of all athletes. So Title IX is definitely a massive influence for increased participation of women in sport. College divisions, we have 5 divisions. Division 1, 2, 3, you have the NIA, the NJCAA. Not spend too much time here, but understand that there's only about 10% of all U.S. high school soccer players that will play college. 10%, all right, at the college level. So that's 1 out of 10 to keep in mind. And only about 2% will end up playing in Division 1. Everybody likes to talk about D1, but just understand that there's only about 2% typically of players that will end up in Division 1 soccer. We will look at numbers a little later. This table, the main takeaway here maybe is in terms of the scholarships, because to be recruited means that you will get some kind of scholarship, right? Well, Division 1 teams typically have about 14 scholarships available. Division 2 teams have 10 scholarships. Division 3 do not give athletic scholarships, but they provide different kind of assistance. Now, soccer is considered an equivalency sport. That means that colleges are not required to give full ride soccer scholarships. So when you see 14, typically what will happen is a coach will divide those 14 scholarships into different amounts for different players, and then supplement different financial aid and different kind of scholarships, right, for kids who need it. But in terms of pure athletic scholarship, you only get 14. Now, balance that with about 30 players on the roster on average. So that kind of gives you an idea, right? So not everybody will, mostly not everybody will get scholarships, athletic scholarships, but you may get different kind of scholarships. The takeaway here is, yes, you have a lot of NCAA schools available. Scholarships will not be available for everyone, but also getting good grades is essential, because obviously if you want supplemental, say, academic driven aid and so on for those who need it, then having good grades is important. Now, as you sit down and consider down the line if Division 1, 2, or 3 is the best for you, another big takeaway is that Division 1 obviously is the most competitive level. Many of us have played, you know. Division 2, if you want to seek athletic competition, but more of a balance with academics. And Division 3, that's really if, yes, you still want to play soccer, but you want an overall well-rounded experience. Okay. You also have the NIAA and the NJCAA. The NIAA is the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics. NJCAA, that's for junior college. It's an option. You know, the junior college option, if kids want to develop athletically and academically while saving money, typically it's an option, but it's also a feeder system into many D1 schools. Like some kids might be more challenged academically and would go the junior college route, and then through that eventually find their way into D1. Now, there are scholarships that I did not know. As a matter of fact, I discovered this through this research. You know, junior college teams have on average 24 scholarships available, which is a lot. And NIAA team, which are smaller colleges, you know, like private colleges, have about 12 scholarships. Okay. To get recruited in soccer, it's not an exact science. Everybody has their own path, but a few things that might help. You want to assess your talent in a lucid way, right? You don't think that you were Messi if maybe your level is more of a Roberto Carlos. I'm just saying. So be lucid with assessing your talent. You know, work with your coaches and so on, and with others who are knowledgeable in the game, just to have a proper assessment. You obviously want to create a target list, which will help you choose the proper school. There is people who talk about Division 1 or bust, or Power 5. You know, it used to be Power 5, now it's Power 4. There's one of the conferences, the Pacific 12, is no longer a power conference. So you now have the Power 4. But really understand that you can find good soccer in another division. It does not have to be Division 1. You also have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. You know, the coaches are busy, so you have to be very proactive in the process. You have to create your own highlight videos and so on and so forth. Participating in showcases and tournaments is important because you can be seen by coaches and attend clinics as well. I said I'm going very fast through this because, you know, it's a few years down the line. Right now, it's more about just the knowledge. Remember the numbers I mentioned, 10% of all U.S. high school soccer players will play college. Only 10%, 1 out of 10. And only about 2% will play Division I soccer. So stay proactive in the process. You don't want to wait for the coaches to find you, and understand that you have life beyond Division I. The professional ranks, NWSL, if that's part of your daughter's pathway, you feel like this is something that's, I mean, she dreams about and she wants to work for. Well, the NWSL is the top league in the United States. You have different leagues around the world also. Currently, we have 14 teams in the NWSL, Houston Dash being our home team. Every roster has a minimum of 22 players, maximum 26. So it is definitely very competitive. And the way to get into it for young players is 2 different ways. Either you go through the draft, so you're in college, you get drafted, or you go through there's a new process called the U18 early entry mechanism. We will cover that later. But the draft is essentially, we're all familiar with the draft, right? It's at the end of the season, the draft is organized, the best players get called. To give you an idea of the numbers and how competitive it is, you had 230 players, all right, representing 138 schools that declared for the draft. And only 56 players were selected, about 24%. Still a high number, it's over one. But yeah, I'm sorry, I was thinking about something else. 24% selected here, 56%, 56 players. Very competitive. So, and understand that the spots can be limited. If that's really in your card, there's no room for everybody, right? It's very, very competitive. That new process that I was mentioning, the U18 entry mechanism, this is a brand new process that started in 2023. So essentially what this says is that teams can now sign players, a maximum of 4 players under the age of 18. So between the ages of 16 and 18. I'm sorry, younger than that. It can be even 15. You had a 15-year-old that had signed. So what is really the incentive here? One of the arguments I heard a lot is that clubs are telling parents that if your child is good enough, if you go through this mechanism, right, you actually have more control over your final destination because it's not a draft. A draft is like a lottery. Whatever team selects you, this entry mechanism, you deal with the clubs. Like you go through trainings with the different professional teams. The ones who like you can give you an offer. So parents just choose that path so that they have more control in the process on where the kids will end up going. There are some measures to protect the players because they're still little kids, just to be frank. So you see that, for example, the contracts have to be guaranteed until they're 18. You cannot waive the players. The players must reside with the parents or legal guardians. They must be, U.S. citizens and so on. And here you have a few pictures of players who have succeeded in the process. You have pictures of 2 ECNL players and 1 GA player. So Melanie Barcenas on the left from San Diego, she signed when she was 15 years old with the San Diego Wave. We have Kennedy Fuller in the midfield, who played in our state in Texas with Solar SC. So she signed with Angel FC back in March of this year. She was 17 years old. And you have Kimi Ascanio, who's a GA player who played her youth soccer in Florida at Florida United with the GA, and she's with San Diego Waves. So you can see that both ECNL and GA players have a path here. I'm looking at the time. Okay, 8:15. I might have to rush through because we only have about 15 minutes here. All right, now let's go into, which I think is the big chunk of our presentation now, the good old ECNL versus GA comparison. All right, so you will hear the statement, if you're good enough, you will be seen. It doesn't really matter your badge. Now, is that really true? Is that the case? Well, we'll look at it very quickly. Some of the comparison points. We'll look at the number of conferences. We'll look at the conference alignments, like the difference in, your traveling distance and so on. We'll look at the showcases and national events, college placements, national team placement, and then the professionals. In terms of conferences, you have 3 columns. You have a GA, you have ECNL, and then you have ECRL, just for comparison. I know for most of us at Rise on this call, we have some pre-GA, we have some ECNL, but ECRL might be in the card, or DPL might even be in the card, or what's not. But anyways, in terms of the conferences, GA has 10 conferences, the ECNL has 10 conferences. The boys, let's now look at it. In terms of the number of clubs in GA, currently you have 95 clubs in GA, you have 128 clubs in the ECNL. So really, when it comes to just GA and ECNL, you have a similar number of conferences, 10. ECNL has way more clubs when you factor in both the ECRL and ECNL boys. That's a given. But the GA is at 95. Now, next year is projected to be 111 GA clubs. So that will be a significant jump. If you look at the distances to travel, because that can be significant. If you decide, should I go to GA? Should I go to ECNL? Especially for us here in Texas. Should I go to Albany Challenge? Should I go to, Rise or HTX? Or should I go out of these leagues? You'll see that For Houston, the GA is in the Frontier Conference. ECNL is in the Texas Conference. Okay, the GA has 10 teams. The ECNL has 16 teams. Just by those numbers alone, you know that you have more games to play, more travel, right? So that's something to factor in. In terms of the states that are covered, the GA is covering, you see, we have Texas, we have Louisiana, and we have Missouri. On an ECNL, you have Texas, you have Colorado here, and then you have Oklahoma. So the distances to travel are fairly similar. It's just that you will travel more on the GA side, right on the ECNL side right now, because on the ECNL, as I said, you have 16 teams, but you have 6 teams out of Texas. Whereas on the GA, you have 2 teams out of the state of Texas in Missouri. So that's something to consider in terms of distances to travel. The growth trends. Obviously, ECNL started before GA, right in 2007 is when the boys ECNL was founded, and then the girls, which is this blue line here, is ECNL girls, started in 2009. There's a slight mistake there, but anyways, so the main takeaway here is that there's an upward growth, right, for all leagues across the board. So it seems like soccer, these leagues are recruiting more and more clubs. So that's what these graphs represent. The ECNL girls, as I said, is 10 years older than GA. So obviously ECNL is bigger, has more club, has more of a branding, more of a presence, having been around longer. But you can see that there's really growth on both sides. ECNL is still up. If you look at national event and showcases, apologize about that. You look at the different national event and showcases. Now, not to go through every single one, the main thing is that ECNL has multiple events and showcases. These showcases are essentially important for you to play against competition that you would not play against outside of the conference, but also being seen by college coaches. Because obviously, to make it efficient, coaches will not come to your club and just recruit players individually. They love these showcases because you have a lot of players in one place. So it is good to participate into this. I'll share the slide also later for those who want to review all the showcases and so on. But the main takeaway, you have a lot of showcases on ECNL. Well, on the GA side, you also have a lot of showcases. All right. So as you can tell, multiple opportunities to go, and you will also get attraction from college coaches. You will attract college coaches and so on. So you get competition, against teams out of your conference. So the things you get on the ECNL in terms of the showcases, you get similar benefits on the GA side. One might argue the quality of the team and so on and so forth, but in terms of being seen by coaches, competing against top-notch competition, you do have that. In terms of college placement, which one does better than the other? Right now, it's a fact that ECNL places more. I'm talking about D1 here, okay, specifically. I'm not talking about Division 2, Division 3, NIAA, or NCAA, just Division 1. ECNL is doing better in terms of placing players than the GA right now. All right, if we look at the commitments for 2025, these are not my numbers, and I have not fully vetted these numbers. I'm fully relying on what this platform is providing. These numbers are from the platform called I Am Youth Soccer, which is available on Twitter and so on. They do a great job in terms of breaking down data for soccer. Well, they looked at commitment from 1,320 players, and out of those, 69% went into ECNL, about 18% went into the GA. The ECRL had about 5% of the commitment, and then other leagues. So you might have some HISAs, you might have some leagues that are not, ECRL, G, or ECNL. About 4% of the girls came from those leagues, and then internationally, about 3.2%. All right. So if you want to take a deeper dive into these numbers for the 2025 class, a bunch of tables here, but let's just kind of digest that real quickly, and then let's focus on the allocated spot, which is the finality of all this calculation. You will get the slide if you want to kind of go through this at a later time. But essentially, there is a projected 1,900 spots available. I'm looking at table number 3. So about 1,932 projected spot that are. I'm sorry, I was looking for the allocation and the committed and the players that will be left out. So, right. So about 19 players on the ECNL will get spots. About 508 players on the GA will get spots. About 140 in the RL, about 123 from other leagues, other than ECNL, GA, and the RL, and then internationally. I think this other league portion is an interesting one because it really tells you that it is possible. You don't just have to go to G or ECNL or ECRL, right? It is possible. Granted, the odds are very minimal to make it to Division One if you are not in GA, ECNL, or as a woman, of course. Boys is a totally different ballgame. But it is possible. The numbers are there. But also an important fact is that many people will be left out. Right, so out of all the players that were available, so in the recruiting class, you might have about 2,794 players available, and you have all these 862 left out, for example, in ECNL, and you have about over 1,500 in GA. You have over 2,500 players left out from the RA League. So that tells you, obviously, that not everybody will play Division One soccer. That's just a given, and I know most of us know it, but it's important to keep that in perspective. When our girls get to that age, 5, 6, 7 years down the line, we start considering all these options. Yes, I want every single one of our girls who want to play soccer, college soccer at the highest level, to have that opportunity. If D1 is what they want, I hope everybody gets it, but understand that it is not everybody, right? So, and going to D2 is not the end of the world either, or Division 3. You might still get great benefits. Now, some if you want to combine the best academic and the best athletic, best being subjective here, and if the big D1 school is yours, you give it a shot, but maybe soccer might not be in the card. Anyways, this is things we should just keep in mind when that time comes. It is 8:25. Who places more players in the youth national team? I'm not going to look at all the youth under 15 and so on and so forth. If I look at just the U14 for the last cycle, we had 7 GA clubs that were represented and 19 ECNL clubs that were represented. And this is that U14 development program I mentioned initially. So when the girls went in California and they were divided into rosters and so on. So you had 36 players selected overall. So 7 GA club and 19 ECNL clubs. And those are the clubs that were represented there. And so you had 4 goalkeepers, 4 defenders, 4 midfielders, and 10 forwards. So everybody has a chance. But the takeaway here is both GA and ECNL will provide a path to the youth national team. In the U17, these are just a few quick pictures. The top row those are the girls I mentioned before: Melanie Barcenas, Kimi Ascanio, and Kennedy Fuller. Not Kenny, but Kennedy Fuller. They're now professionals, but they went through the youth national teams when they were still in ECNL and GA, right? And on the bottom, that's the U17 for this cycle, the 2024 cycle. These are 2 GA girls that are in that cycle, one from Virginia, one from the IMG Academy in Florida. These are a few more GA girls in the current U19 cycle. You have college players, but came from one Georgia, another one in Georgia, and we have Michigan. Well, National Blue is actually Michigan. That's a mistake I made. That's a Michigan club. The goalie came from a Michigan club. So again, both ECNL and GA will provide a pathway. Let's conclude this presentation with the phenomenal case of Maria Sanchez. Why am I bringing this up? Because this is more on the unconventional path. Because some people will tell you it is ECNL, GA, ECRL, or bust. Yes, the numbers tell us that most successful soccer players come from those leagues, but here we have a clear case of somebody who was on the polar opposite of that. All right, so this is a phenomenal case in my opinion. The chances of this reproducing itself today are not as high because now the leagues are bigger, more exposure, you will get seen more likely. But Maria Sanchez, let's look at her situation very quickly. So she was with the Houston Dash. She's now with the San Diego Wave, born of Mexican immigrants in Idaho. She had never, and I mean never, played pay-to-play club soccer. All right. Yet she ended up being drafted by the Houston Dash in 2019, and she briefly became the highest-paid professional soccer player back in December with a deal worth $1.5 million, which has been broken since. So how exactly did she go from never playing club soccer to making it all the way to the top of the soccer landscape, professional landscape? Her youth, as I said, she never played, but she always played with boys in Nampa in the community. That's how she developed her game. She's also very athletic naturally, right? She's one of those gifted kids. And so in high school, that's when she really came to the attention of the soccer world. She tried out and made her high school team. While in high school, she broke the state and school records. In 4 years, she scored 178 goals, 68 assists. She was named the Idaho Player of the Year. They retired her jersey when she graduated. Despite all that, she only received one scholarship at Idaho State, goes to college, and she's a massive success. Scores 22 times in 37 appearances. She earns all academic, all conference honors. And then, well, somebody tells her about the national team, the Mexican national team that had an open tryout in California. So her sister drives her all the way to California, multiple hours from Idaho. It was an open tryout. She goes, tries out, ends up making the team, and ends up going to the 2015 Women World Cup, being the youngest player on the team. I mean, that's just phenomenal. And after that, she received so much publicity, and so schools started recruiting her, Stanford and others, but some things happened with her initial school, and she ended up going to Santa Clara for 2 seasons, where she played 42 times and scored 13 goals. And she led the whole NCAA Division I with assists by having 16 assists in one season, and graduated in 2018 and ended up being a professional. So every pathway is unique. As you sit down and assess where you want to go, there's a lot of pressures. I understand we all want what's best for our kids, but every pathway is unique, and many different ways lead to Rome. We are reaching the end of our presentation. It's 8:30. I think we started 5 minutes later, right? So if you guys indulge with me, I'll finish this in 5 minutes. Okay, so I know, guys, choosing a club and so on is a daunting task. There's a lot of uncertainties. There's a lot of questions when, coaches change and so on and so forth. We don't get offers. It is a daunting task. I went through it a couple of years ago, and every year it seems to always be the case. And the question, should my child stay at the club? Should they join another league? Should they, go to another badge? How do I help my kid achieve their soccer goals? I think that, understanding all the challenges and opportunities in the different pathways is important, which is why I put those pyramids on the left again. So I think that's where it starts, right? Understand what the different options are, understand the opportunities and challenges, and then set specific goals. That will help diminish the stress. That's a good starting point. And also understand that the key is developing, right? And development does not happen with the badge alone. It happens with the activities that will be occurring within the clubs, the trainings that we do, what's happening in our homes. So developing as a player goes way beyond just, having a certain patch, a certain badge. on our shirt. Just look at Maria Sanchez. As I said, never played club soccer, but then she's on the very top. And you can't tell me she's not a good player. I mean, she's one of the best wingers and forward. It is a balancing act. So I think it's very important to consider all factors, not just it's important, ECNL, GA, and so on. Those are important factors. But beyond that, I think it's good to look at the overall child well-being and the mental stability of our kids, their development. 5 questions you want to ask yourself. I ask myself these questions a lot. These are personal opinions, right? You might disagree. Those who want to stay for a Q&A, I know it's late, we might talk about this. But the question I like to go through is like, okay, is my child really happy and thriving mentally, right? Does the club have institutional knowledge? Like, do they have credible people who have achieved what we're targeting? Do they have coaches with that knowledge? That's important. The coach is a critical component. Is the club invested in developing our children? How do we see that? Like, what are the proofs of that? What's the plan? What's the development plan? Okay, so is this a club that is focused on developing players or just poaching, or as we say, recruiting, to be diplomatic, or recruiting players from other clubs? And so if we end up recruiting other players, what happens to the players that we currently have? Like, what is the plan with the club? Is the club just forgetting about them, placing them somewhere else? That is important, because it means if my child goes on team B or team C, I kind of want her to have a path to come back to team A if that's the goal, right? So all those are things you kind of want to look at as you decide the next chapter of your kids' life. In conclusion, it's about helping our kids develop in an environment that suits them and a pathway that will help them succeed. I mean, we shouldn't forget it's about the kids. And then once the path has been selected, keep your eyes on the goal and help them become excellent players. How do we become an excellent player? It's by becoming a complete player. That is the subject of another presentation. I have done a lot of research on that as well. This is now the how. So once you have your pathway, you have decided where you want to go. Now the next question is, okay, how do I develop my players to get to that point? And so it's based on these 5 points, right? The first 4 are from U.S. Youth Soccer uses that as a criteria. So technical, tactical, physical, and mental. The creativity is an added part from me, because I think that's lacking a lot. Creative problem solving. So that's part of my assessment. But then I will have another presentation on that, and then we will go from there. I need a favor from you guys. I'm going to send a survey in emails that are registered in this presentation with those questions that I mentioned initially. Sorry for your eyes. Sorry for your eyes. Remember these questions that I had. How do we make soccer more accessible? How do we develop excellent players? We've already addressed question number 3. Task force and so on. So I'll just ask you to rank which one you think is important to you, but also if there's another one that you want to specifically address, please help me know. And so that will also help me prepare maybe another presentation or something to be able to help answer your question. On that note, this ends the presentation. We have leaked 6 minutes beyond the 8:30 timeline. Thank you for your attention, and I'm opening it up for Q&A. It was supposed to be 15 minutes. If you have to go, I understand. If you're willing to stay, feel free to ask your questions or share any comment or feedback that you might have. On that note, thank you very much again, guys.